So we unconsciously make things symbols, and um, so a lot of these symbols are symbols that our ancestors left. Okay, their life had meaning, and they wanted to tell us what their lives meant to them. And so, starting about 35,000 years ago, human ancestors started to make cave paintings in southern France and other places. You know, they were messages in a bottle for the future. I mean, that's what I'm doing here. I'm creating a message in the bottle. This is a message to my grandchildren, a message in the bottle for the future. Because I'm not always going to be here, but my grandchildren 20 years from now can look at this and see something about what granddad thought. Okay, I don't have anything like that from my grandparents. I have my grandfather's gold watch when he retired from the Pennsylvania Railroad, uh, and I gave my daughter his wife's engagement ring, but that's all I have of my grandparents. I have no idea. I mean, yes, a couple of them lived longer, so I have something of an idea of what kind of people they were. But the other two died young, and uh, my father's father had a stroke when he was 58, and so, and then he survived for 10 years and died when he was 68. But he was basically non-compos mentis during that 10-year period. And so, you know, I used to not respect him very much, but the reason I did was because I knew he was kind of a alcoholic Willie Loman. I remember Willie Loman from Death of a Salesman, and he had been a traveling salesman, and he had gotten into all the same things that traveling salesmen got into, and and I didn't respect him much. But one of the things that my father told me was that when he was 7 years old, they had to leave this house where they were living in the middle of the night because it had been foreclosed. And this was the 1929 crash. Okay, and my grandfather lost his business. And so by the time I knew him in the early 50s, you know, he'd come out of that pretty well, I guess. And you know, he was making a living anyway, and I could communicate with him and so on. But you know, my father told me some things about him that made me not respect him very much, except that now similar things have been happening to me because of the crash of 2008. And so now part of what I'm doing with the courts of Maryland is fighting back on his behalf, okay, because I see what he was up against at that time, and I respect him a lot more today.
A lot of people lost their homes and farms and everything.
Absolutely, absolutely, and so I see what he was up against, and I don't want it to happen to my grandchildren. And what he did is, you know, his brilliance in part was that he got my father into the Naval Academy. And so because my father got in the Naval Academy, he was there during World War II. Okay, so he didn't get killed. And so therefore I came along, and so his grandson was then able to get a law degree and an MBA and to understand what these guys on Wall Street did to us. Okay, so now I know what they did to us, and I can fight back a little, but I know my grandfather couldn't fight back. And so it's, you know, it's a way of passing the meaning of your life down the generations, and he couldn't fight back, and the only thing he could do was help his son survive World War II so that I could be born and get the education necessary to fight back. I mean, you can think of the meaning of his life as that. But I have nothing from him other than that. That's my that's me inventing a meaning of his life.
When you're talking about him as a traveling salesman,
Yeah.
um, by the difficulties and things that he ran into, do you mean things like living hand to mouth and sales going really well one minute and then turning sour the next, sort of like Willie
I
Loman?
think I'm sure it was very tough during the Depression.
And it was an existential type of crisis, as it was for Willie Loman, in the sense that it's very brutally hard on the ego.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you can be sure of it. Because not only did he lose his house, but then the Great Depression started, and there was nothing.
Did you continue as a salesman then?
Honestly, I don't really know what he did during the Depression. I know that once the war got going, he was too old to go in the service, because by then he was in his mid-40s. And so he ended up working in a factory or something.
What did he sell when he was selling?
I don't know everything. I know at the end of his life, right before he had a stroke, he was selling fixtures for, he was selling plumbing fixtures and things like that. So he was representing a manufacturer of plumbing fixtures that was going around to hardware stores, taking orders from hardware stores type thing.
So
right?
did you inherit any of his sales acumen?
I must have, I guess, because when I was in my 30s, I never wanted to be in marketing. I wanted to be an idea man, a thinker. I'd just gone to law school and business school, and I wanted to write things and work things out up here in my skull. But later on, actually, once I started practicing law by myself, I realized that everything is marketing. Okay, and I also learned from the Marine Corps, all these officers would say to me very often, "I hate politics." They'd say, "I hate politics." And so just tell me what I have to do and I'll go do it. Aye, aye, sir. I'll just go do it, right? And these guys were very effective at going and doing it, right? But those guys don't make the top command levels, okay? Because everything is politics. Everything's about politics. In your own job, it's about politics, right? Even your interrelationships in your job are political in a way, right? And there are political aspects of it. And so what I started to understand in my mid-30s was that everything is marketing and everything is politics. And for example, even though you work for the federal government, you have a personal brand within the federal government, okay? It's your brand, and you're understood in a certain way by all of your colleagues, and based on your brand and the way that you do your job. Everybody is like that. And so we all have a brand, and we have to sell that brand. The sooner you realize that, the better. The sooner you realize that everything is politics, the better, right? It's all politics. And so, unfortunately, I didn't get that early enough. And you may not.
How does that come around to symbols?
Well, it comes around to symbols because you start to get the whole interconnection of this stuff. And so I started to, I would get into a very tough situation in work a few times, and when I did, my psyche would provide an answer. Okay, and I'll give you one example. There was one time where I really offended one of my Indian partners, and we were having a fight, and it was a knockdown, drag-out fight, and this guy was 20 years my senior, And my other partner, the guy that I was working with every day, the guy 20 years my senior was one of the investors, right? But my partner that was actually 15 years younger than me, he separated us. He played referee, and he and I went back to his house, and then we had this knockout, drag-out fight for like 5 hours. And I said, "Man, this is going to be over. He and I are going to break up." And finally, and I was trying to get my point across, and he was a knucklehead, and so we were two rocks banging into one another, right? So it was a standard duality, like everything. And then all of a sudden, I just blurted out, "Okay, it's over. Get the papers together. I'll sign up. I'll resign, and it's over." And I started to walk out of the building, and then he quit. He stopped, and he backtracked. Okay, he started to find a compromise because he needed me. You see, these were Indian nationals trying to do business in the United States, and they only had me as a knowledgeable Caucasian lawyer MBA that knew all the skeletons in the closet of the company. Okay, so they knew they couldn't run the company without me. Okay, and so when he and I fought, we fought, but when I just backed away, then he just sort of fell over. It was sort of like Judo against sumo, right? I just stopped doing the sumo and started doing Judo. Once I did, he just toppled. And then I basically got what I wanted, and it went on then. And so that was just my unconscious telling me what to do. Okay, I'll give you another example. One time when I was in the 4th grade, I was out in front of my house, and I got attacked by a German Shepherd dog. And the dog was chasing after me. It was vicious as hell. It was barking, and I was running away from it, and I didn't know what to do, and it was catching up on me, and suddenly I just stopped. I just stopped and held perfectly still, and all of a sudden this dog just stops. Okay, well, that came from my unconscious. I didn't know what to do. Later on, my dad said, "Yeah, that's what you do." Right? But nobody had taught me that.
That's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it?
Right. But nobody had taught me that. I mean, the way to handle a dog that's getting really angry at you is just stop and stare at it.
But it's not always guaranteed you're going to have a positive outcome when your unconscious speaks, is it?
No, I mean, it's not guaranteed. Obviously, it's not.
So what's the point?
Well, the point is usually it works. So,
So it has a high success rate.
I mean, it's an instinctual reaction, right? That was an instinctual reaction.
And you do that with your dreams too. Your dreams guide you, correct?
Yeah, very largely. I mean, they do. Or at least they tell me something, right? They tell me what's going to happen. They predict the future sometimes.
So that you can avoid it?
Maybe not avoid it, but be prepared for it. Okay. And so, sometimes I'll be in a very tense situation, and my dreams will put me in an intense situation, and it sort of shows me what's going to happen. And so then I say, "Oh, okay, that's what's going to happen." Then I know. And when it comes, then I'm not surprised.